In this video, we are looking at how to solve a quadratic equation by completing the square. So in general, the process of completing the square is taking our equation in standard form and converting it to vertex form. Then from there, we can plug in 0 for y and solve for x. So to take this equation and convert it to vertex form, we're going to group together the first two terms. Our a value here is 2, so we have to divide the 2 out from both of those terms. So when we do that, we have y equals 2 x squared. Negative 5 divided by 2 is minus 2.5x. Close parentheses, minus 12. Now, we have a decimal here for our b value, 2.5. That does not mean that we did anything wrong. That just means that we have a decimal. Okay, so our next step then is to add in a c value to the inside of the parentheses. To get that, you take your b value divided by 2 and you square it. So we're going to be adding a new c value on the inside of the parentheses. This is the b value that we are using, not the original one from up top. So c is negative 2.5 divided by 2 squared. And remember, anytime that you are squaring anything that is a negative, you want to make sure you put it in parentheses so that you get the correct answer. So then we have 1.5625. I'm going to leave all four decimals there because it stops there. If this continued on, then I would round that off. Okay, so then we have y equals 2x squared minus 2.5x. Then we're going to be adding that new c value that we found over here on the inside of the parentheses, so 1.5625. Close the parenthesis, bring down the minus 12. We have to balance this equation. We wrote plus 1.5625. That's on the inside of the parentheses that is being multiplied by that 2 out in front. So the value that we added in here is 2 times 1.5625, which is 3.125. So the value that we added in here is a positive 3.125. So we have to balance that on the outside by subtracting it. So our last step now is this is a perfect square. When you have something that is a perfect square, where you have a 1 in front of your x squared, you have the relationship between c and b such that c is b divided by 2 squared. That means that you can rewrite that as something being squared. That something being squared is x plus your b term divided by 2. So we have x plus our b term, which is negative 2.5. Dividing that by 2, we have minus 1.25 squared. And then we bring everything else down. So y equals 2. Combining my like terms out there, negative 12 minus 3.125 is minus 15.125. Okay, so we've converted from standard form to vertex form. That process is called completing the square. Now to solve, what we do is we plug 0 in for y, because when we are solving these equations, we're solving for the x-intercepts. So we're solving for the x value when our y value is 0. So now we solve this equation for x. So x stays here. We have to remove everything off from it. So the first thing you're going to do is add the 15.125 to both sides by 15.125. So then we have 15.125 equals 2 times x minus 1.25 squared. Then we divide both sides by 2. So dividing both sides by 2, 15.125 divided by 2, you get 7.5625 equals x minus 1.25 squared. And then now you take the square root of both sides because the square will cancel with the square root. So the square root of 7.5625 is a plus or minus 2.75, and that equals x minus 1.25. When you are taking the square root, it's important to remember plus or minus because a positive 2.75 squared equals 7.5625, and a negative will also equal that. All right, last step then is we're going to add 1.25 to both sides. When you do that, what you're doing is you're adding it to a positive 2.75 and a negative 2.75. So we will have two values for x, and that's because the parabola will cross the x-axis in two spots. So 2.75 plus 1.25 gives us 4. Negative 2.75 plus 1.25 gives us negative 1.5. So I have here approximate squigglies, but really we end up with exact answers of 4 and negative 1.5. So what that means is if we were to graph this, our a value is a positive 2, so it's opening up. And these are your x-intercepts. So your parabola would cross the x-axis at 4 and at negative 1.5. So it looks something like that.